In what has been described as victory for Nigerians, the Senate has finally approved electronic transmission of election results subject to Inec's discretion. In a bid to widen democratic participation, it also approved the use of direct primaries by political parties. Arise political editor Samna Sambo reports.
The Senate approval follows a motion for a recommittal of the Electoral Act Amendment Bill by the Senate leader, Senator Abdullahi Yahya, where the upper chamber decided to rescind its decision on some affected clauses of the bill as earlier passed. The lawmakers then went into a committee of the whole for consideration and reamendment of clauses 43, 52, 63 and 87 in the bill before its eventual passage. The new bill now reads that, subject to Section 63 of this bill, voting at an election and transmission of results under this bill shall be in accordance with the procedure determined by the Commission, which is Inec.
Those against any, the ayes have it.
To promote popular democracy within political parties, the Senate, in a landmark decision, also approved that direct primaries shall be compulsorily adopted as the only means for conducting political party primaries. This means that the indirect or delegate system, which has been controversial, will no longer be in use if the law is assented.
Unlike the delegate system, where money bags will simply hijack the party and enthrone whoever they want to enthrone, regardless of whether it's acceptable or not. But this move will certainly make it possible for good politicians to come in. People that have no money, as long as they are popular, they will come and they will get elected.
It is a way of giving power back to the people who are members of the political parties. This is not about any political party. Every political party will enjoy this right. Every card-carrying member of all the parties will enjoy this right.
And I think the only problem we have with this one is that not every party has the capacity to be able to organize direct primaries. So I think that we may still have to leave it in the way it is so that the parties that have the capacity can do direct. Parties that don't have the capacity, constantly support the position of the leader.
So those in favor of that clause 63 stands part of the bill, say aye. Those against any, the ayes have it. A bill for an act to repeal the Electoral Act and enact the Electoral Act 2021 and for other matters connected there with 2021, third reading taken and the bill is passed.
The report was earlier presented by Senator Kabiru Gaya-led Senate Committee on the Independent National Electoral Commission, and members of the Harmonization Committee in both chambers will now meet to finalize the new amendment. Meanwhile, the Inter-Party Advisory Council, or IPAC, which is the body of all political parties in Nigeria, says the Senate's reversal of itself is a victory for democracy and progressive governance in Nigeria. Somna Sambu, Arise News. The Senate.
Also, Senator Kabiru Gaya, Senate Committee Chairman on Inec, gave his views.
We are legislators and we are representative of people. That means the Nigerians all over, because we have 109 senators, we have 360 House of members. All of us are representatives of the people. So we go down to our constituencies and get their opinion. And when we're doing constitutional amendment, we also go down to get people's opinion. And even when we're making our bills, we get people's opinion. So what happened really, there was a lot of cry by Nigerians, this is what they want, this is how they want it. And we represent the people, so we should look at the views of Nigerians and see how best we can be able to accommodate the interests of our teeming population. And that's the legislation. Legislation is you listen to the people, make up a law that is convenient and good for them, and they should be part of that law. That's why we do public hearings during when we're making laws, when acts are ready for presentation.
Right, Tundu, a lot to unpack this morning. Finally, The voice of the people.
Yes, isn't it great?
Yes.
I think the Senate should be commended for being responsive to the people, because accountability is a huge part of what it means to be a democracy. They could have dug their heels in, couldn't they, and really further embarrassed themselves. But they didn't. They saw sense. So that's really good, because it has to be, stressed. The really infamous part of that bill is Section 52, subclause 3, which was passed in a particular way by the House of Representatives, but when it got to the Senate, what was passed was that electronic transmission is sort of subject to the approval of the Nigerian Communications Commission and the National Assembly, who will determine when that's permissible, which of course is a total usurpation of the functions of Inec and is to be rejected, and I'm glad that it was rejected. And as Sumner's report also said, Section 87 was also amended. All parties are to have direct primaries. I understand the concern of Senator Abaribe, but I'm not convinced by it. I don't mean to sound Darwinian, but really at this point, it's survival of the fittest. If you as a party cannot afford direct primaries, then perhaps it should not be a political party in the first case. Because there are other requirements of political parties. You're supposed to have a structure all across the country. Sometimes political parties don't do that, but they feel very comfortable to field candidates. So I'm sorry, the bar does need to be lifted. And if you cannot make that bar, maybe merge with another party, you can have a coalition like our ruling party, APC. Anything is possible. But we cannot lower the bar just because some people cannot reach it. That's not acceptable. Indirect primaries are really blatantly unfair, blatantly stacked against those who don't have the kind of money that they need to win over the delegates. So I like this idea of direct primaries. And then there was also the amendment, I believe Section 43, which is just about provision of suitable electoral materials, voting machines, and what have you. And Section 63, transfer of results in a manner prescribed by Inec. So this is a good day for democracy and a good day for the Senate.
All right, Dr. Bati?
On electronic transmission of results, you will recall that when 3 months ago, the National Assembly took a decision on Clause 52, subsection 3 of the proposed Electoral Act Amendment 2021. The problem then was that, look, the House of Representatives took a position endorsing the request by every Nigerian, by most Nigerians, that electronic transmission was possible and that INEC should be allowed to do so. The Senate took a different position. It said, yes, electronic transmission is possible, but then that clause 3 sub-clause 3 in clause 52 then stated that the INEC will need to take the permission of the National Communications Commission and also the Senate to be able to go ahead. Now, the outcry then, the outrage then was that this will amount to an erosion of the independence of the Electoral Commission and a mockery of that word independence. So now the Senate reversing itself, although the spokesperson for the Senate says, no, it's not quite a reversal. It's just a reworking and a deletion of that clause 52, subsection 3. Whatever it is, it fits the expectations of Nigerians. And what are the expectations of Nigerians? One, that the Electoral Commission will be independent and be allowed to do its work. Two, that the electoral process can only have the kind of integrity that people are asking for, the credibility, if there is transparency and accountability. And many Nigerians are of the opinion that, look, electronic transmission will assure that. Three, INEC itself had made it very clear that it has the capacity, it has the structures, it has tested the processes in the past, and that it will be able to do it, starting with the November 6th Anambra gubernatorial elections. And then we had the case of Kaduna State, where the last local government elections in that state were transmitted electronically, and it was for the most part a very successful event, maybe each in one or two local governments, but all the stakeholders supported it. So now that we are at this point with regard to the electronic transmission of results, yes, it is indeed a great development, but there is a consequential step. President Muhammadu Buhari will have to give his assent. If President Buhari doesn't give his assent with regard to that clause, then of course the National Assembly has powers to override the president in line with the expectations of Nigerians. And I hope that when that amended bill goes to the president, there will be no waste of time. Because the problem in 2019 was that the amended bill, 2010 Electoral Act, got to the president close to the election. that excuse cannot be given now. There is enough time, for the necessary structures to be put in place and for Nigeria to experiment further with the electronic transmission of results. Well, as for direct and indirect primaries, opinion had always been divided on that. You recall even within the APC, within the PDP in the last election, the intra-party politics centered around whether the primaries should be direct, which would mean only registered members can vote, or whether it should be indirect, where delegates will be elected, and those delegates would in turn choose who the candidates will be. Now, the PDP has outrightly rejected it. Others are saying, look, the Senate cannot impose the mode of selection of candidates, on political parties. 3 issues have been raised about the capacity of the political parties. If you look at the political parties we have on the list, some of them, are not as strong as APC or as strong as People's Democratic Party. The whole idea of those saying you can't impose direct primaries is to say, look, the delegate system even makes the process far more participatory and is less costly, whereas direct primaries, will require additional cost. So all of these arguments are out there in the public domain, but it's not cast in gold, in iron yet, because the 2 relevant committees of the 2 chambers will have to meet and their positions will have to be harmonized. So let's see what happens, whether, the joint committee will take along the objections that have been raised by concerned stakeholders with regard to whether the mode of selection should be direct primaries or indirect primaries.
So most importantly, we say it's a victory for democracy, but true victory comes when people go out there, get their PVC and participate in the electoral process and vote their choice. Have you got yours today? The responsibility is on you. That's all on News Headline. We'll take a short break. When we return, we'll have Michael Wilson, Adesu of Moroa, Aaron Akerians give us updates on global business, COVID-19, sport and activity. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Morning Show here on Arise News. We're now being joined with the Global Business Update by Michael Wilson in London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning. Basically, inflation fears actually worrying the markets overnight and into today. And of course, it's the big reporting season starting in the United States. JP Morgan is the first one today. And depending on what they actually say, it'd be interesting to see how the corporate heavyweights as well react to supply chain problems, which are affecting all economies all the way around the world. So basically, let's have a look at some Asia Pacific, and fairly mixed actually. The Nikkei down marginally, Kospi a little bit higher, mainland China mixed as well. China's trade surplus with the US has risen to a monthly record in September. Imports up 17.6% on last month, less than the 20% estimated. But it's not that so much how much they are exporting. It's the wish of the United States that China actually chimes in with what they agreed, in other words, to buy US exports, and this surplus shows that they're absolutely not doing that. And also China is continuing to obviously be troubled by Evergrande and all the rest of it, how much that will actually affect the economy, and also the general energy crisis as well, which is hitting it too. Billionaire Alibaba founder Jack Ma surfaced, actually. Do you remember him? We were talking about him last year, weren't we? And he gave this rather controversial speech. He's disappeared out of most people's sight, but apparently, according to reports, he's come up surfaced again in Hong Kong, and he's been talking to business associates there. So let's recap the United States. Stock futures, little changed this morning. Dow futures up about 7 points. Basically, we're talking about continued volatility. It's really this question of when the taper's going to start. We had 2 Fed officials, Vice Chairman Richard Clarida and Raphael Bostic, who's the Chief Executive of the Federal Reserve in Atlanta, both alluded to a lot of volatility. No particular hints as to when an interest rate or tapering might occur in the United States from there. Something, though, it's quite interesting, here's a figure for you, that record 4.3 million Americans quit their jobs. That's the latest jobs figures out. It's an independent survey. But either a lot of Americans are suddenly giving up on work, or and this is, I think, the most important thing, wage bills will have to increase to get them back again. There's been a short-term fix as far as the debt ceiling in the United States is concerned. They put off this rather dangerous game they've been playing, or at least the politicians have, a brinkmanship. Janet Yellen warned that the country would reach its ceiling by the 18th of October. Well, that's been extended into December, and it's just down to Joe Biden to sign it off. But again, it's only a temporary respite on the debt problems there. Apple shares have dropped once again on iPhone 13 production fears. Another company suffering from hiccups in the supply chain and the rest of it, and Apple shares fallen 1.2% as a result of that. IMF has, we were talking about the IMF yesterday, not for forecast, but for its CEO, but slightly reduced its forecast as far as the global outlook is concerned. It's actually, again, sort of sitting very much on the fence about interest rates, saying, well, it might be necessary to raise them if inflation threatens, but you don't want to choke off growth. Well, I think we know that sort of page 1 in the economy handbook. I'm sorry to be skeptical about the IMF, but you see these pronouncements from them, and you have to worry about whether they're actually in touch with reality or not. I mean, you take your judgment on that yourself. Now, the UK is warning the EU not to have a historic misjudgment over Brexit. We're going to see more proposals on the Northern Ireland Protocol, this incredibly complicated trade complication of having this border on the island of Ireland, simply because Northern Ireland is part of the UK and the UK has gone to Brexit and so on. It's proposed that Brussels will actually relax some of the customs controls, but Brussels is very keen to sell this as helping the people of Northern Ireland, and it's nothing to do with making concessions for London. There you go. IMF is also warning that the UK recovery will lag other G7 countries, and it's sort of shown in the monthly figures out. The economy grew by 0.4% in August. That's due to camping and dining out, believe it or not. But they are quite important service industries, but they're lacking this kind of push back. And all in all, the economy will be about sort of 4% smaller than it was before the pandemic. The UK, more or less, now congestion, you know about congestions at ports. This is Felixstowe, which is the largest UK commercial port. There's a logjam of shipping containers there, partly caused by the lack of HGV drivers. It is improving, but there is considerable blockage there, and it's going to take a while to move this through the system. UK job vacancies reach a 20-year high. Again, we've often talked about this, a lazy nation not particularly wanting to get back to work. High vacancies in retail sector and motor vehicle repair and so on. UK unemployment, we saw these figures yesterday, at 4.5% compared with a rate of 4.0%, i.e. 4% before the pandemic. Volatile energy markets here to stay. That's according to the International Energy Agency. It says that this Paris-based organisation saying that volatility will continue. I think we sort of knew this, but I'm putting it in there for the record. Another sideways session as far as oil concerned, and gold, well, softer yields actually sort of supporting it. In other words, people are looking at gold. They're still a bit risk averse, and I don't blame them actually, given the uncertainty around the global markets. That's your global view.
All right, Michael, I mean, this trend around the world that a lot of people simply do not want to work is quite scary. Could it be because of the long effect of the stimulus package that has been given to them? They're so used to it, they don't want to work. And how can really get people back to work? Because that's going to be one of the biggest major economic challenge now, post-COVID. Supply chain is being disrupted. I mean, you talked about those job vacancies being in retail, very key areas, and people are not getting back to work. And I quickly want to talk about the big four consulting firms. There's a report out that says that PwC did audit the account of Evergrande 6 months prior to the bubble bursting, and they said the account was perfectly in order. Is there something that this consulting firm should do that they are not doing? Because that's a big indictment on PwC now, and they've not responded.
Well, I'll leave that to PwC to answer, actually. I mean, the big four accountancy firms or well, they call themselves management consultancy firms nowadays, don't they? In the UK, have come under criticism over and over again for not recognising problems. And I suppose it's about disclosure and so on. I honestly don't know the answer to your question. I join with you in criticism of these people not recognising that something was going wrong, because something somewhere down the line must have averted somebody's attention to the fact that Evergrande had too much debt. But what's too much? Again, I'm not sure, what the detail of it is, but I join with you in criticising the fact that when you call these people in, you need a very clear idea of what's going on. As far as getting people back to work is concerned, yes, I agree with you. I think that there have been these sort of stimulus packages, but what else were governments supposed to do at the time? I mean, we did say, did we not, on this very programme, that of course somebody's going to have to pick up these bills. What we didn't realise perhaps was that people were thinking, well, I'm being paid for not working, so I won't bother. Thanks very much indeed. And it's the usual thing, isn't it, of that little gap between what you actually get for working and what you get on benefits. And that's the thing. Now, it takes a hard political mind to say, OK, we'll restrict benefits. And people have tried this for years in this country. I don't know what it's like in Nigeria, but certainly in this country, they've tried to make it worthwhile to work. And that's the real difficulty. It's where you actually draw the line at where benefits stop, and then you actually have to work to get further benefits if that's what you want, or you have to work to get a higher wage. It's a difficult transitional stage, but it's nothing new. And unfortunately, as you say, it's been exacerbated by these stimulus schemes.
Well, quickly, I mean, I just need some clarification from you about your skepticism about what the IMF is saying. What are the specific aspects of the statements by the IMF that you think we need to take with a pinch of salt? Is it, the statement that central banks will need to be absolutely vigilant about high inflation, or the fact that the recovery process, the post-lockdown recovery process is messy, particularly not just in the big countries, but also for developing countries that do not have the capacity, that do not have such a good capacity to deal with vaccination and COVID, or the fears that the IMF raised about COVID resurgence and how interest rates may have to go up, a bit more quickly than expected. Because I thought those are some of the issues. And on the Northern Ireland, the proposal from Brussels, will it resolve, that conflict with the UK in any way? Up to 50% customs on goods to be taken off, even much higher for plants and meat. And is there a middle ground that we may be expecting from the negotiations? Although the Chancellor is talking about the EU promoting poison, and they need to take out the poison, whatever that means.
I think that let's talk about Northern Ireland first. I mean, it's so intensely complicated. So there'll be proposals from Brussels to try to make the customs less bureaucratic and all the rest of it, and to try to resolve, which is it's an irresolvable problem. There is a barrier on the island of Ireland between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, and it's intensely complicated, and it's been complicated by the fact that we have decided, we voted for Brexit and so on. So Brussels is saying this morning, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen today. Lord Frost, for example, our negotiator, is getting very, very antagonistic towards Brussels. But Brussels is saying this is a concession, so they're going to try to make things less bureaucratic as far as the border is concerned. For the citizens of Northern Ireland, they're saying it's not a concession for London. In other words, it's not one government conceding to another government. It's just one government, out of the generosity of its heart, if you believe it, the European Commission actually saying what we're going to do is we're going to try to make things slightly easier for the citizens of Northern Ireland. This is going to continue. Let's see what happens tomorrow. I don't know. All I've done is reflect what the proposals are and to say this is what Brussels is actually saying. We're going to try to make things easier. How that actually develops during the day, I really don't know. I suspect there'll be a lot more discussion about this and a lot more animosity between Brussels and London about it. It's the way it is, unfortunately. As far as the IMF's concerned, all I'm saying about the IMF is, one, we talked about it yesterday. I think the brand's damaged. I've always been slightly suspect of it because it takes a backward view about what's going on. But what is it saying that's new? I mean, I report it because it's But what do we not know? This inflation is growing in the world. Yes, of course we do. Do we know that one of the ways to do that is about increasing interest rates? Yes, of course we do. Do we know that that might lead to stagflation? Yes, of course we know that as well. This is like easy stuff. Do we know that the COVID pandemic may rise again? Yes, we do. What is it actually telling us that we don't know? That's my criticism of it. Not because I'm criticizing its analysis. It's just so obvious. What is it doing? What is it telling us that is new about what's going on? That is my question to you. I don't see it at all. I see it as an organisation that I don't. And as we were saying yesterday, I still feel as though I don't like this shoe-in business about Europeans being put in charge of it. We were just sort of getting to discussing that, and of course, time hit us slightly. But why isn't there somebody for example, like the World Trade Organization has got a Nigerian head? Where's the African involved in the IMF? You know, these are the growing economies. This is my criticism of it. It's not fit for purpose. It's something that used to exist a long time ago after the Second World War. I think we should move on.
All right. Thank you so much for your insight, Michael. I really appreciate you. For update on COVID-19 pandemic around the world, Adeso Omoro is here with us. Adeso, great to have you.
Great to be here. Thank you so much, Rufai. Good morning. Good morning, Tundu, and good morning, Dr. Bati.
Morning.
Well, I bring you more statistics this morning regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. It is true that there's so much unknown about the virus and the pandemic, especially because there's no global definitive conclusion on its origin. However, let me tell you this morning that one thing we do know is that it was first reported in China. And now officials from China say they are going to test tens of thousands of blood samples. The particular figure that has been released by Chinese officials this morning is 200,000 of blood bank samples from the city of Wuhan, and they say it's part of a probe into the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic. So this is coming from China itself. They also say that the blood bank samples have been retained for 2 years now, in case they are needed as evidence in any lawsuits related to the blood donations they are from. So China says it's looking into the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic as well by testing samples it kept since 2019. However, some scientists have quickly reacted to this. They are saying to have kept the blood samples for 2 years, they may be elapsing for 2 years now. But we'll keep an eye on that developing story from China. Here are some other quick statistics we should run through this morning. Over 6.5 billion doses of vaccines against the virus have now been administered globally, and that's according to the Johns Hopkins University. We also know, according to that tally, that over 238 million infections have been reported officially globally from countries and territories, with about 4.8 million deaths so far. Now, here in Nigeria, the FCT, as well as the FCT is the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, for those of our viewers who are watching from across the world and do not know that. So the FCT and 10 states reported 175 cases of COVID-19 in the last 24 hours. Nigeria did not record any COVID-19 related death in the period. The Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, reported the highest infection for the day. This was followed by Lagos. Lagos saw 34 new infections. It is difficult to say what is responsible for this decline, but the data has become unpredictable in recent times, moving like a yo-yo, if I must say. And let's have the latest vaccination exercise data from across the 36 states as well as the nation's capital, Abuja. If we have it on screen, just to sum it up, this is a breakdown for first doses and second doses by the state. But to sum it up, 4.6% of eligible population have now been vaccinated with at least one dose, while 2.2% have been fully vaccinated in Nigeria's targeted population. Nigeria hopes to vaccinate 70% of its population. 70% of about 200 million people. And so this is a minute fraction from that. Meanwhile, a COVID-19 booster may be required for residents in the epicenter, Lagos, where you guys are. And this, according to the Commissioner for Health, is to keep Lagos residents safe from the pandemic. He was speaking yesterday during a briefing. He says the state government also plans to vaccinate 30% of its population by the end of this year. He reiterated the safety of vaccines, and he assured that Lagos State will continue to follow the science in responding to the virus. Professor Ake Abayomi was speaking yesterday. Elsewhere out of Nigeria, in the U.S., a judge ruled that New York State cannot impose a COVID-19 vaccine mandate on healthcare workers without allowing for religious exemption request. The decision prevents the state from interfering with religious exemption requests, as I said. And this happened because 17 workers sued over the mandate, alleging that their employer revoked an exemption or refused to consider it because of the state's emergency vaccine requirements, which was announced on August 26th and came into effect in September. This ruling yesterday came on the same day two of the nation's largest airlines, Southwest Airlines and American Airlines, said they plan to follow looming federal guidelines that require their employees are vaccinated against COVID-19, despite an order from Texas Governor Greg Abbott, who has been attempting to block the mandate. He describes the federal mandates for vaccines as a bully. The White House has criticized Governor Abbott. The White House says politics. The White House is insisting that politics was behind the move by Governor Greg Abbott of Texas. And finally, to Russia this morning, where the country says it will test a nasal spray form of its Sputnik vaccine against COVID-19 among adult volunteers. And this is according to a state document that was released. Russia, you remember, was quick to develop its vaccine and launch it when the pandemic struck. But the uptake of this vaccine has been slow in the country. There are even reports of Russians going to neighboring countries to get Western vaccines. Details are sketchy about how this will work, but we do know that the nasal spray is to be applied in 2 doses in a clinical trial in St. Petersburg. The country at the moment is struggling to rein in rising numbers of infections and deaths. The other day we saw President Putin coughing nonstop during a state address, but he says he's fine and he's been vaccinated. Back to you guys.
It's so funny that even Russians don't trust their own vaccines. But, you know, Russian innovation has never been in doubt. You know how well they did in the space race in the 60s. So I don't necessarily doubt the efficacy of their vaccine, but it's quite funny that they do. I wanted to talk about New York and the 17 health workers. That's a very interesting case, and I'm sure it will be appealed. So I wouldn't be jubilating too much if I were those people, because the grounds of their lawsuit are a bit faulty, because the COVID vaccines do not contain aborted fetal cells, have nothing to do with aborted fetuses and what have you. I think what they're trying to express is that their religious beliefs preclude them using any medication that is in any way involved anywhere along the chain. And if that's the case, I think some of the vaccines, the Moderna, I know for sure, and I think Johnson & Johnson as well, use cells from electively aborted fetuses in the 70s. So it's not like some kind of child sacrifice was done and then ended up in the vaccine, which I've actually heard. That's not quite accurate. But then it's like the saying goes, you don't want to know how the sausage is made, you just want to eat it. If you go into a sausage factory, you will never eat a sausage again. And it's the same thing for a lot of medications that we take. A lot of those medications that we take routinely have been tested using cells from aborted fetuses in the 60s and the 70s. And you know the case of Henrietta Lacks as well, that lady, the African-American lady who died, and her cells are still being used in medical research. So I think if you're squeamish about things like that, just don't even bother, because there's so many medications that you preclude. But I guess it's their constitutional right to go to court and fight, and I'm sure the state will fight back just as hard.
Well, the governor, Ms. Hochul, she's already made it very clear that she will go to court, she will go on appeal in this particular matter. And she stated her responsibility as the governor of the state of New York to be able to protect the people over which she serves, as governor. But the judge didn't look at the science behind the claims by these 17 health workers. He gave that temporary restraining order injunction on the basis of the fact that, look, they have the constitutional freedom of choice. But where, the thing is tricky is that most of those 17 health workers who took the case to court, Dr. A and others versus Ocho, is that they are Catholics. And the Pope had already said, look, members of the Catholic Church can take the vaccine. But on their own, they are saying that there is an issue with their religious beliefs. So this is just a temporary restraining order because as of yesterday, October 12, the state had taken a decision that would be the deadline for health workers that do not take the vaccine. And you recall that the governor of New York had even threatened that she was prepared to even recruit soldiers or recruit persons from neighboring states to come and be part of the vaccination process in the state of New York. Another matter of interest, which the judge looked at, is the fact that the original mandate, which was put in place by former Governor Mario Cuomo, had stated Governor Cuomo has stated very clearly that there will be religious exemptions. Now, what his successor has done is to remove that clause and to say, look, there's no such thing as religious exemptions on the basis of belief. But it will be interesting to see how the case pans out. It's not just in New York, also in other parts, of the U.S., in Florida, what is the state you mentioned now? In Texas, people have been going to court. Yes, Texas, where you have Judge Abbott. People have been testing the law and asserting their own difference. Now, as is the case in Texas with Judge Abbott, Judge Abbott is one of those governors that do not believe in vaccination. They are anti-vaxxers. The other one is the guy called Ron DeSantis. That's the governor of Florida. So now you have these two big airlines saying that, well, we are federal contractors. And because we are federal contractors, we will go with President Joe Biden, who last month gave the directives, an executive order, as it were, that, look, if you are not vaccinated, you are not even allowed to enter federal buildings. And, of course, that controversy is there. Well, of course, that even with Ron DeSantis, as the case with Greg Abbott, these are just populist moves because I think both governors, are going to participate in the mid-elections next year, and this is just a way of pandering to populist expectations. But as for Nigeria, Lagos State, yes, the Commissioner for Health in Lagos has said we may get to a point where people in Lagos State will have to take a third dose, and that's consistent with what has happened in Canada, what has happened in the US and in the UK. But he has not provided the details yet. But whatever decision is taken, we will need more doses. We will need more vaccines. And the poser for Professor Abayomi is that Lagos State had said independently, they will get their own vaccine doses. When are we going to get that supply? Instead of, every state in Nigeria relying on the federal government and whatever we get from donors.
I mean, a lot of the people that make this argument of, medical fetal cells and things like that, I think to a large extent, let us be very careful with these arguments. Nobody wanted to be in this place. COVID happened. We need to get a vaccine. It's medical science. It's medical advancement. It is in the realm and the reach of innovation. And look at it this way. The inspiration that these people use is for the betterment of humanity. So there's no one hard and fast rule about it. It's medical science. We'll experiment with all sorts of things. For instance, sometimes we'll take blood samples from other people and take the antibodies in the blood and give it to them and call it monoclonal cocktails and things like that. We will always do all of these things. I know the line they're looking at is, religiosity and all of that, but nobody wants to be here. And according to their religion, is to save lives. And they want to save lives too with this research. So I encourage them to take this because I hear this argument one too many times. I know there's some religious bodies that are against blood transfusion, but if it's in a bid to save life, we could save life first. We could do organ transplant just to save life. These are the things that are, innovative in medicine and things like that. Nobody wanted to harvest another person's organ to transplant to be able to save the person. But you see, when you look at it critically, we don't have a spare part somewhere for human parts. So we still need to graft from other people and used to be able to save life. So that's the argument I believe they should explore. It's to save life in the end. Will it save life? Yes. Will it get people better? Yes. I think that's the principal thing.